Awesome. All right, so it looks like we are recording and good to go. I think we have everybody in, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. Like I said, for those of you that don't know me, my name is Chrissy Carroll. I am a registered dietitian, RRCA running coach, and USAT Tri Coach. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to you all about nutrition, exercise, and immunity today. And we also have on our Zoom today, we have Emily, who is an intern that is with me from Simmons. So she is going to be tackling some of the nutrients we're going to talk about today as far as immunity. I'll be tackling just kind of the background, some of the exercise connections and supplements. But if you have any questions at all as we move through this, feel free to unmute yourself and ask, or you can type them in the chat box, or you can wait till the end. So this is meant to be fun and flexible and, you know, just an enjoyable kind of presentation here. So let me bring up my slides for you all to see, and I can screen share here. All right. So before I close out everybody's faces so I can do this, can everyone see my slides? Are we all good? You can give me a thumbs up. Awesome. Okay, cool. So I'm going to kick things off here just by giving a little bit of background about, you know, what immunity actually is. I feel like that term gets thrown around in the media a lot. And just to kind of give you, you know, a little definition here, immunity is really, it's a complex system of organs and cells and pathways with one common goal, and that's to prevent disease. And we can get disease or sickness from all different kinds of pathogens. It could be viruses, bacteria, fungi, parasites. And I think what most of us think about when we are thinking of the immune system is really the different viruses we get this time of year, right? So like colds, the flu, all of those different things that we tend to come across. When we think about immunity, there's two different types of immunity. So there's innate immunity and there's adaptive immunity. Innate immunity is what I like to think of as like the EMT of the situation. So innate immunity is a general attack against something that your body thinks is an intruder. So it's not super specialized. It's just they realize, oh no, there's a problem. We need to get going on this and try to fix it, right? So like the equivalent of an EMT in the medical community. Adaptive immunity is more specialized and specific. So that would be like your neurosurgeon, right? So it's very specialized to the specific type of pathogen that it's trying to fight off. So if you got a certain kind of illness, your adaptive immunity is what remembers that and produces antibodies later and can mount a very specific attack accordingly. In the media, we always hear this stuff about, boosting the immune system. Oh, we're going to boost the immune system. And I really dislike that term, actually. We want the immune system to work properly. An immune system that's in overdrive is not a good thing either. So when your immune system is in overdrive, that's actually what can happen when people have autoimmune diseases, right? Your immune system gets mixed up and it thinks that your own body is something problematic and it starts kind of attacking your own body, and that's not good either. So I think the goal is really proper function, efficient function, and not necessarily boosting. When it comes to exercise and immunity, I want to talk about both moderate and vigorous exercise. So you guys can let me know in the chat, what kind of exercise do you do? Are you runners, triathletes, yogis? What are the kinds of things that you all enjoy? Let's see. Runner, CrossFit, yoga, runner, distance running, swimming. Awesome. Cool. So I am a runner myself as well. So that's good to know because I'll be able to talk a little bit about running specifically, runner and weights. Okay, cool. Great. So for most of us, you know, we're going to be doing, it sounds like a lot of runners here. So most runners are going to have some runs that are moderate exercise and some runs that are vigorous exercise. When it comes to moderate exercise, that actually does support the immune system. It supports immune health. There used to be a couple years, I shouldn't say a couple years ago, but years back, we used to have this thing called the open window theory. And researchers used to think that exercise wasn't great for the immune system in an acute bout, right? Like you get back from your run. They used to think that right after you got back from your run, that your immune system was weakened. And there's actually been quite a few studies since then that seem to debunk that theory. They've seemed to found that what actually happens is that even though some studies show changes to certain immune cell numbers and certain functions, what they have actually found more recently is that those cells redistribute to different tissues. And it's thought that that's actually because we want like a heightened state of immunity in those specific places, a heightened state of surveillance in those specific places. So what's interesting is that now we think that moderate exercise, at each bout of moderate exercise that we do, actually helps to support the immune system. In that, like every time we do it, we're getting a little bit of extra support for our system there. I think what's important about this is that we often think, I know, and you can agree or disagree in the chat there. I think a lot of us as runners, we sometimes get this like very type A mentality of like, I need to do this great training run and it's going to have hills and intervals and this and that. And like, it's hard to sometimes back off and do those easy runs and that comfortable mileage. But when we think about the immune system, those are the runs that can be really, really beneficial for the immune system. When it comes to vigorous exercise, this is one that is a little bit more mixed when we think about the evidence. So there are some researchers that think vigorous exercise really like tough stuff like your, long run marathon training or very tough interval workouts, things along those lines, powerlifting. I know somebody mentioned weightlifting. So if you have a really, really tough workout, there's some mixed research as far as what that does for your immune system. And some of the research suggests that vigorous exercise people end up with more upper respiratory tract infections. Now, the caveat I want to give here is that it's very, very difficult to control those studies for a lot of confounding factors. And some examples I'll give here. Okay, training schedule. So are the people that are getting more of these infections, are they not getting enough rest? Are they, doing too many intense back-to-back sessions? We don't know those things. Events. So a lot of times there's been a couple of studies that show things like, after a marathon, people may have been more likely to get sick. Well, maybe that's because of the intense exercise, but maybe it's because people were standing in a race corral with a lot of people, or, having a post-race brew afterwards with a bunch of people. So I think it's hard to tease out some of these additional factors. Sleep is another thing. So if somebody is training vigorously, they have a big event coming up, it can be difficult to sometimes for them to fit in everything that they have to in life, right? Like work and training and whatnot. And sometimes sleep is what ends up being cut. And sleep is so, so important to immune health. The other thing would be diet, and an overall balanced training diet is going to help to support the immune system. So if somebody is skimping on their diet when they're doing vigorous exercise, that could be one of the reasons for it. So I just like to say here, it's kind of hard to give a specific answer as to like, does vigorous exercise help or hurt? Because I really think that it's not clear in the research yet, and we don't know if it's because of all of these other factors. But I think in general, when it comes to exercise, moderate exercise or properly integrated bouts of vigorous exercise, I think that those do support the immune system. A few tips on that when it comes to exercise and immunity. Give your body enough time to rest, right? So as runners, we think of the 80-20 rule. Some people do 70-30. So it's, up to you kind of how you approach that. But generally 70 to 80% of our runs are at a, comfortable conversational pace, 20 to 30% being the tougher stuff, the speed work that we do, whether that's tempo runs or intervals or whatnot. Fuel right during prolonged exercise. So when you're exercising for longer than 75 to 90 minutes, you generally should be taking in some carbohydrate during that bout of exercise. Now, there are some exceptions here for if we have fat adapted runners in the crowd, and when we get to Q&A, you're more than welcome to ask me about that, and we can chat a little bit about that. I'm not a huge fan of that methodology, but I do know people like it. But otherwise, if you're just following a normal diet, fueling right during prolonged exercise is important. And there has been some research that when people don't fuel, when they skip the fuel during, a 3-hour run or something like that, that may be connected to potential immune system weaknesses. Proper recovery meals as well. I do want to make the point that we don't have to go overboard on recovery. I think recovery has been pushed so much in a lot of sports nutrition things. And yes, recovery is important, but for your average weekend warrior that's training for something, recovery is really important when you're doing a long, intense session. So, you're doing your long run on the weekend, or maybe you have a really tough interval session during the week, or, and this would be most importantly, if you're doing 2-a-day workouts. If you're doing 2-a-day workouts, the recovery meal after the first workout is really important because that's what's going to replenish you for that second workout of the day. So recovery meals would be something that has both carbohydrates and protein in it. Getting enough sleep each night. Again, most adults, despite what we think our bodies can do, most adults do need about 7 to 9 hours of sleep. So making sure that you prioritize that, because there is ample research that getting less sleep not only affects your immune system, but affects training, affects hunger, all of these things. And then last but not least, just an overall balanced training diet. Getting enough calories to support your activity, making sure that you're getting enough protein to support recovery. And protein can be plant-based sources or animal-based sources, whatever you prefer there. So I am going to toss it over right now to Emily, who is going to talk a little bit about nutrients.
Hi everyone, I'm Emily. I didn't get to talk right at the beginning. Chrissy has so nicely introduced me. So nutrients are essentially very important when we start to talk about immunity. Maybe before we jump into it, if you want to put in the chat maybe some nutrients you've heard about that you kind of think of when you think about immunity.
Ooh, we have a little bit of antioxidants. Good one.
That's a good one. Vitamin D and C.
Awesome. A lot of vitamin C and D. That's good.
I'm glad I did the order that I did then. All right, why don't we jump right into it then? So vitamin C. We all know about vitamin C. It's kind of been one of those nutrients that's been passed down generation after generation, that get in all your vitamin C, especially during the winter, because you're going to get sick more. But what does it actually do in our body? Why does it help with immunity? Well, there's a lot of cool functions that vitamin C actually does in the body. So the first thing we think of is collagen. What exactly is collagen? We hear about collagen powders, supplement collagen. What is it actually doing? So collagen is one of the main proteins that is found in skin and bones, and that helps really structurally. So especially when you're thinking about running, you're putting your body under a lot of stress. There's a lot of inflammation, and that can lead to some impacts on skin and bones. So having that collagen is really important, especially for recovery. Creating immune cells. These cells use vitamin C to help with creating new cells. And then when the immune response is ready to go, we have those cells ready to go. And then as mentioned before, antioxidants. Vitamin C is actually an antioxidant. But what do antioxidants actually do? Our body, on a day-to-day basis, hour by hour, minute by minute, is doing so many things and creating a lot of products, some that are really good and really help us day to day, and some that really aren't so great and might cause harm. A lot of the times those are filtered out through our liver and our kidneys and taken out of our system. But sometimes it's a little hard to get rid of them. That's where antioxidants come in. This is especially like vitamin C and another vitamin we're going to talk about. And these bad kind of things are called free radicals. And so these antioxidants come in, they do their fun little atom reconstructing, and they're able to help make those free radicals not as dangerous in our body and helps us get rid of them easier. So where can you find vitamin C, especially in our diet? So orange juice is a very well-known one. A super fun fact that I remember learning my freshman year was that red bell peppers have a surprising amount of vitamin C, which is really cool because bell peppers are delicious. There's citrus fruits have a lot of vitamin C. And then there's a lot of other foods that you wouldn't necessarily think have vitamin C, such as broccoli and strawberries and Brussels sprouts. So a whole bunch of really delicious things that have a really important vitamin for us. Next up, vitamin D. Not only has it been popular in the media, but it's also been really popular in research. There's a lot of researchers who've been super interested in vitamin D and what it does. We used to think that vitamin D was just about keeping up with our bone health, but we've seen that there's actually a lot of things that it does for our immunity as well. So one of the first things vitamin D does, it's an anti-inflammatory. As we talk about when we're doing exercise, such as running, yoga, moving all those bodies, it's putting a lot of stress everywhere, and that can cause inflammation everywhere. So having that kind of anti-inflammatory property in there can help with especially recovery as well. It can be used as a receptor on immune cells. What are receptors? They're kind of like little prongs, almost, if we kind of think about it in an imagery kind of way. They're little prongs that come out of these immune cells that actually will help grab on to viruses or pathogen that is within the body, and that can help set off that immune system. So these cells are able to use the vitamin D that we take in, get them as receptors, tag on to those pathogens, and tell the body, all right, we got someone in here, let's go. And that's the really important part about these receptors, is that they help jumpstart innate immunity. So innate immunity is that very first EMT. They catch that pathogen and we're like, all right, full gear, let's start to go. And there's actually been some really interesting research around vitamin D and athletes. And it has shown that usually deficiency can be linked with increased risks of certain infections, such as those upper respiratory tract infections. And it has shown that most athletes are kind of vitamin D deficient, and that can lead to lower performance and not as much energy. But when they aren't vitamin D deficient, they have shown better values and better activity as well. So where do we get vitamin D? We all know that milk is very high in vitamin D. It's fortified with it. So that means the vitamin D is put into that milk when it's going through and being packaged. Fatty fish, something like salmon, has a lot of vitamin D in it as well, along with a bunch of other really cool things. 15 minutes of sunlight, so we can get vitamin D from the sun. There is a caveat though. This is without wearing sunscreen or a lot of layers. So if it's just one day you need your vitamin C, you go out in the summer wearing shorts and a tank top, and then just stand basking in the sun for 15 minutes without sunscreen. And that's how you can get vitamin D. But we also risk the sun and its rays and certain types of skin cancer. So it's really kind of this weird thing that we have to balance as humans. And that's why supplementation is actually really encouraged for vitamin D, because so many people are deficient, especially us in the Northeast during the winter times and early spring, because the sun is really far away from us and we're not able to get those sun rays as easily as we do in the summer.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in here and add around 9 to 10% of people generally have like a clinical vitamin D deficiency, but up to about 40%, give or take, of people have what's called suboptimal levels. And suboptimal levels of vitamin D can still impact both performance as an athlete, as well as your immune system and immune health. So if you've never had your vitamin D levels checked, that's something that can easily be done as part of like a physical at your doctor's office. But especially here people in the Northeast tend to be more at risk for it, just because we do have fewer days where we're outside in the sun, and again, kind of risk of skin cancer, balancing that with that. So I just wanted to mention that, but I will let Emily continue on here.
Thank you. So this one has also been really popular in the media as well as in research, is zinc. So that's a kind of a micronutrient. It's found in certain foods. We don't need a lot of it, but it is important in some ways, and it has shown an important role in immunity. So it helps with creating more immune cells. It has this really cool function that when it's put into your body and it helps with creating cells, it kind of like helps links genes together. It's this cool thing called zinc fingers, but I won't get too much into it because there's a lot of cell and genome stuff and I'm not too confident with that, but zinc fingers are really cool and they help with making more immune cells. And it's also shown that when you have an adequate amount of zinc in your diet, or let me back up on that. So zinc is really important, but research has been using mostly lozenges of zinc. And from that research, they have shown that it may shorten colds. But since that's with lozenges and it's really hard to control diets, especially in studies, we don't really know for foods containing zinc, but I just wanted to point that out as well. So what foods are high in zinc? So the one interesting one is oysters are very high in zinc. A lot of other animal products such as red meats and poultry also contain a lot of zinc, and whole grains as well. So brown rice, regular rice, oats, barley, got all that good zinc in there. Next one is vitamin E. Vitamin E has started to kind of emerge in the immunity system. It was a lot in like dermatology and like helping with skin, but it's kind of iffy on the research side. But what it does mostly is that it could possibly increase the activity and activation of certain cells. So when we have enough vitamin D, it'll help activate those cells. So really bring them to life, make sure they can go and do their thing. And then by increasing activity, they are better kept at doing the job that they have to do. And it's also an antioxidant, just like vitamin C, so it can get rid of those free radicals in our body. What foods contain these? These are a lot of nuts and seeds, a lot of good carbs and fats, especially avocados as well, and certain types of fish have them too. Lastly, I know we talk about nutrients a lot, but as someone studying nutrition, I also really want to talk about the balance of the whole diet in general. So it's all about balance. So when you have that diet, that's what we considered a mixed diet. So it includes carbohydrates, it includes proteins, it includes fat, all in a certain amount of ratios. It also is really important for immune health and function, also as athletes as well. So it provides energy for not only your cells to work and do its thing, but also to help you get out in the studio, out on the field, out on the running track and do your thing. It helps for building hormones in cells. So a lot of those proteins are kind of broken down and they're used to help create the hormones that help our body run and help make the cells as well. And running the body as well, we have something called homeostasis, and that's keeping our body in like the perfect condition for completing daily activities, which is always kind of fluctuating, but we always find that balance. So next up, another really popular thing that's been in the media and something I've also been super interested in the last few years is the microbiome. So for the microbiome, we think of prebiotics and probiotics. And the really cool thing about the microbiome is that it's still being researched a lot today because it's still a really new topic. If I can remember, it's probably only around like maybe 30 years old, which for a research topic is not that, it's very young. So first, a little bit of vocabulary. You hear probiotics and prebiotics thrown around all the time. People asking, what should I do for this? What should I get? So what are they exactly? So probiotics, these are the actual live strains of bacteria. There are several bacteria that we have found from research that have shown to give positive effects for our body. And a lot of these foods are mostly fermented. So just sitting and fermenting and help proliferating a lot of these different bacteria. So think of not only like fermented vegetables, but also yogurt and kefir are also have some of those bugs in there. And some of these foods actually tell you which kind of strains they have. So the best example I can think of is Chobani, especially like the Chobani yogurts. If you look on the side, kind of near like the nutrition label and the ingredients, they'll also show you what strains they have in there. And then you can look it up. It's like a fun little like find and search game. And then prebiotics. So how are they different from probiotics? Prebiotics are these foods that actually feed those strains and help create more of these good bacteria in your gut microbiome. So there's greener bananas, asparagus, onions, and garlic. But what makes them different than other foods? They're high in something called resistant starches. So starches are also carbs, which is very important to know. But the thing about resistant starches is that our body can't break them down like carbohydrates and proteins and fat. We all have different enzymes and things that help to break these down. But for resistant starches, we haven't made a mechanism to actually break these down. So that's why these little bacteria are really important for us. They're actually able to break them down. And then we have this little relationship where they'll take what they want and to help them live, and then they give back what we need to help live, which goes into my next slide as well. So notice that probiotics and prebiotics also not only help just with general body function as well, but they're really important in digestive health and immune health. So as we talked about before with immunity, one of the main things that's kind of thought about for any kind of athletes or people who do a lot of exercise are upper respiratory tract infections. And I know as a dancer, that was also something that I would have to consider as well after a long competition weekend, after going hard in those dances, just performing our hearts out. They can really help with strengthening our immune systems a little bit. And another really important thing to talk about is that some athletes can actually get GI distress or gastrointestinal problems. So this is kind of like that nauseated feeling, sometimes diarrhea, maybe vomiting. And as Chrissy discussed before, this can come from a multitude of things. Not only is it like overtraining, doing a lot of things without really giving yourself that proper rest, but this can also come from just traveling a lot for those activities. So that can come with why it's associated with running in competitions. And then also certain antibiotics can get rid of those good bacteria as well and kind of funk up that system a little bit and there's something called antibiotic diarrhea that can also get rid of those bugs as well. And sometimes when we don't have those good bacteria, that can kind of not do well for our immune system. But when we have those bugs by eating foods that are probiotic and prebiotic, there have been really important things that have come up and that are really important for our bodies. So when we have these bacteria and we feed them, they give us something called short chain fatty acids, and those can be sent out to the body to be used for a plethora of other things. A lot of the immune cells use them, and they're stored for other important uses. And they also help with protecting the digestive system. They're able to get rid of those pathogens as well. So if you think of something like a stomach bug, that could like get in there, and because there's a lot of those probiotics in there, they can help get rid of that bad strain as well. So there's a lot more research that needs to be in this field, but it has been shown that having these good bacteria can really help with supporting our immune system to get rid of those pathogens and can protect digestive health as well. And honestly, when you eat a lot of these probiotic and prebiotic foods, you do just feel a lot better, and they really help in other nutrient ways as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Emily. I'll also just jump in here. So I do want to note that GI distress during a run is not always necessarily related to the microbiome. It can be, but it can be, you know, like Emily mentioned, it can be related to a ton of other things, whether it's travel throwing off your system, whether it is not practicing fueling during running. One of the biggest mistakes that I've seen with athletes that I've worked with in the past is kind of waiting until like a couple weeks before their big race and then being like, oh, what should I have during my marathon? And it's like, ooh, we really needed to practice this like 4 months ago. You know, you need to, just like you train your muscles, you need to train your gut to be able to handle things, handle food while you're working out. So there's a lot of things that can go into GI distress. So I just wanted to make that point. I did want to also talk a little bit about supplements, because I think that this is another area where there is a lot of misinformation. So as an RD, I always think you should start with a food first approach. The best thing that you can do for your immune system from a nutrition standpoint is to build an overall balanced diet that has lots of variety, lots of color, lots of fruits and vegetables, a good amount of fish and nuts, you know, kind of that overall balanced diet that we think about, because that is what is going to provide so many of these micronutrients that we talked about, like vitamin C and whatnot. Now, when it comes to supplements, though, there are some that I think have some possible benefits here. And I pulled out some of them here, and I kind of have them listed from what I think is more likely to be useful to, you know, there's maybe this might help, but lesser evidence. And I don't know that we're maybe there yet as far as definitely recommending them. So the first one, like we talked about, vitamin D, because so many people are in those suboptimal levels of vitamin D. Vitamin D can be really useful. Again, I think getting your levels checked by a doctor is always smart, because if you do have a true deficiency or your levels are very low, they will most likely put you on high dose supplementation for a limited amount of time to get those levels up to normal. If your levels are just moderately low, or you're just trying to maintain them, generally 1,000 to 2,000 IUs a day of a vitamin D3 supplement is a good choice. Again, you always want to check with a doctor or dietitian, but that is typically a good choice for most people. Probiotics would be another one that I think could potentially be useful there, specifically because not everybody eats like fermented foods. Like if you don't like, you know, traditionally fermented veggies, and you're not a big fan of yogurt or kefir, and you don't necessarily like maybe some of those prebiotic things. Like I love greenish bananas. I like them when they're super starchy, and I know other people hate them and they want them to be like nice and sweet. But if you're not a fan of those probiotic and prebiotic foods, then potentially taking a probiotic, especially if maybe you've noticed that like maybe you're having some GI issues, or maybe you've been getting a lot of, you know, colds and stuff, it could be worthwhile to try out, see if you can kind of get that balance back in the gut microbiome, and see if that helps. I think zinc and vitamin C during a potential upper respiratory infection, there's been some research specifically for zinc among certain populations and for vitamin C among certain populations. So vitamin C, there's been research on like cold weather athletes, so people that are doing a lot of exercise when it's really cold outside, or extreme endurance athletes, that taking vitamin C may help to shorten the duration of a cold. Similarly, zinc lozenges or a zinc supplement may help to shorten the duration of the cold. They do not, unless you are deficient in zinc or vitamin C, they do not prevent colds or flus or anything like that. So I just want to make that distinction there. So they don't prevent anything, but taking them, you know, if you feel something coming on, it may help shorten the symptoms there. Elderberry is another one that, you know, there's not a ton of research out there on that, but there is some research that suggests potentially shortened duration of certain infections among certain populations. So there was one study on air travelers where it may have reduced cold symptoms and duration there. So there's not a ton out there, but I also think elderberry is one of those supplements that has fairly little risk to it if you are, taking it as directed on the supplement package. So maybe worth trying out for you. Beta glucans are a specific type of carbohydrate. They come in supplement form. We do also naturally get them in the diet through certain sources. So like oats are one source, mushrooms are another source. But there is a supplement form out there which may help with the interaction of certain immune cells and the activation of two specific types of immune cells. So that could be worth trying. And then oh gosh, getting a tongue twister here. Astragalus is another one where it's an adaptogenic herb that may support the immune system as far as activation and movement of certain cells. But again, those last two, there really is not a ton of randomized control trials, but might be worth trying out if you do want to test something out. So that's kind of my overview as far as more likely to be useful versus lesser evidence. But certainly I do want to mention, if you want to try any of these, I work with Now Foods. They're one of my clients. So if you use Chrissy as a coupon code, you get 20% off anything there. So if you were thinking about trying something out, again, especially if you don't have a vitamin D supplement, and if you don't know your levels or your levels are lower, that is the one supplement that I really recommend fairly universally among people, because so many people do have those suboptimal levels. So just a couple last bonus tips. Again, get enough sleep, reduce stress. We didn't talk really about stress here, but stress is a major impactor on immune health. If your body is in a chronic state of stress, that's a problem. Little bits of stress are okay. Like, it's normal to be a little bit stressed out when you're doing a big work project, but we want that ebb and flow of it. We don't want to just constantly be in this chronic state of stress, which can do a number on the immune system. Wash your hands. I'm sure we've all heard that enough these days, but just another good reminder here. And then the last tip would be to prepare food safely. So I know we often think about the kinds of illnesses that we get through, from other people, like colds being passed around or the flu, but food safety and foodborne illness is also a big concern, and just making sure that you're cooking foods properly, cooking them to the proper temp as far as things like chicken or beef or pork, not cross-contaminating. So if you cut up chicken on the cutting board, you don't want to cut lettuce on the same cutting board without properly cleaning it in between. All those basic tips that I know are probably pretty self-explanatory. But I am going to stop screen sharing here and now open it up for any questions that y'all have. Feel free to unmute yourself or feel free to pop a question in the comments, and I'm more than happy to answer. Everyone's so quiet.
I won't be quiet. Can you hear me? How are you? How's everyone? First, there's just so many things. I was shaking my head going, yes, I can, it's the gospel. I didn't realize how important vitamin D was until I had a calf strain, and my doctor was like, you need to take vitamin D. I'm like, well, why? Like, I have asthma. So I noticed an improvement all around in that. But the one thing that I know you touched on, and I don't know if you have any more advice, just rest, not sleep, but rest. 70-30, like what, I'm just, any more advice on the rest part? Because I have a hard time doing that. I'll sleep, but then I'll go.
Yeah. So, and I think it's hard because rest is a very variable factor depending on your fitness level, your training level, your medical history, like all of these things that come into play. So the amount of rest in a training plan for somebody that is new to running or that maybe is training for their first 10K is going to be very different than the amount of rest that an elite athlete is going to necessarily need. I think that even with elite athletes, though, we need to remember that most of their running, most of their mileage is done at a comfortable pace for them. Certainly their pace is not necessarily our comfortable pace.
Oh, you're right.
But done at a comfortable pace for them. So, I think when you're structuring your training plan, whether you're doing it yourself or whether you're working with a coach, you're going to have, let's say you're training for a marathon, you're probably going to have a couple comfortable conversational pace runs during the week. You're going to have your long run on the weekend. You're likely going to have, if you're a new marathoner, it might just be like one tempo run day during the week. If you're an experienced marathoner, you might have that tempo run along with a long interval day during the week. But I think the key is you're not going to do that speed work. Let's say you have those 2 days. You're not going to do generally your tempo and your intervals back to back. You're also not going to have a week where it's like tempo, interval, hills, tempo, interval, and then the next week is just all easy stuff. Like there's a logical progression to those things. So I think that, with rest, building a structured training plan, making sure it's periodized so that you are gradually building up in mileage, not jumping ahead too much in mileage, all of those basic training plan principles are what's going to help ensure that your body is getting enough rest. And eventually, with more training, you do adapt to that level and you can have more intense stuff, but you do have to build up to it first. And you need to make sure that even at those advanced levels that there's still periods of rest. And for very elite athletes, it may not be a complete rest day, but it may just be short, easy mileage for them. Does that make sense?
Okay, that makes sense. I'm thinking a rest day for them was like 12 miles in the morning. So not for me. I'll dream about 12 miles in the morning, but excellent. Thank you. That's the biggest thing for me. That's my Achilles is rest.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Yeah, no problem. It's tough. It's tough for a lot of people. Some of us want too much rest and some of us don't want to take it. So it's hard.
There's a question. Can you or should you take a probiotic supplement daily?
So yeah, you can take a probiotic supplement daily. I would say that again, it kind of depends on what the rest of your food intake is like. If you're somebody that you eat yogurt regularly, you like incorporating fermented vegetables, you tend to not have any like GI issues, then I would say your diet's probably taking care of that and you probably don't need a probiotic supplement. But if you're somebody that you don't like any of those foods and maybe you are having a little bit of GI upset, maybe you're having some IBS symptoms like alternating constipation and diarrhea, those kinds of things, then it might be worth taking a probiotic, daily, for the length of the body. Usually they come in like, 30 pills in a package, like a month long, and see if it helps. And if you feel like it helps, then by all means keep it up. And if you feel like it doesn't, then by all means, don't worry about buying it again. It's, it's so individualized. It's one of those things you really have to, I think, kind of experiment with yourself and based on your own body. Now, there are certain strains of probiotics that are helpful for certain things, like there's specific strains that are helpful for infant issues. There's specific strains that are thought to be helpful for immune health, specific issues that are thought to be helpful for certain diarrhea problems. So if you are struggling with a very specific issue as far as GI health, then I would recommend working with a dietitian one-on-one where you're able to talk to them about that and get more personalized insight. Does that make sense, Natalie? Let's see.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, awesome. And then what about collagen itself as a supplement? Yeah, so collagen can potentially be helpful. I think one thing I want to clarify is collagen's gotten so much attention in the media these days that a lot of people, instead of, utilizing like a protein powder, like a whey protein post-workout, they're leaning towards collagen. And that's what I don't want you to do, is use collagen as a post-workout supplement, because the type of amino acids that make up collagen are very different than the type of amino acids in like a whey protein or a plant protein complex. So for workout recovery, if you're going to use a protein powder, you want it to be whey protein or a plant protein complex, depending on whether you have dairy or you don't have dairy. Collagen, again, has those proteins that are more related to like skin health, joint health. There has been some research showing potential benefits for athletes in those areas, but I think it's still very new. So if you would like to try out a collagen supplement for those reasons, sure. I don't think it's beneficial for recovery, and I don't think there's much on it as far as immune health specifically. But for other things, for skin and joint, it may be helpful. I wish I had more definitive answers. I feel like whenever I give presentations, I'm very wishy-washy, but unfortunately, that's just the state of the science sometimes, is that we're kind of, in between whether we can say something for sure or not. So I just like to try to make sure people know that. Just scrolling through here. So somebody sent me a direct message, and I'll just address it. Doesn't vitamin D have to build up in your system when taking supplements? I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, but hopefully I'll be able to answer this. So yes, it does take a while for your vitamin D levels to rise. So if your levels are low and you're only taking 1,000 IUs a day, yes, it'll take a while for it to climb. That's why I recommend getting your levels checked. Because if your levels are clinically deficient, your doctor will most likely prescribe you on a very high dose vitamin D supplement, which, it's, again, I had a deficiency a couple of years ago, and I was on 50,000 IUs a week. That's a lot of vitamin D. Now it's short term, 6 to 12 weeks usually. But for deficiencies, a lot of times you will have that very high dose supplement so that your levels can get up to a more normal level. And then you can maintain it with that 1,000 to 2,000 IUs a day. If your level, if this is normal and your levels are like right down here, then yeah, taking 1,000 to 2,000 IUs will get you up there. But it does take a while for those levels to build up if they are very low. So again, another plug for just getting your vitamin D levels checked if you're not sure what they are. Just scrolling through to see if there's any more. Oh, somebody said that they were able to run their first half marathon because of a training plan that I have. Well, thank you so much. For those of you that don't know me, I have a lot of training plans on my site. So feel free to check those out. I think we're up to like, 23 or something free training plans, anything from beginner learning to run, want to do their first, mile, up to we've got an Ironman plan on there now. So lots of cool stuff. Any other questions before we wrap up? And Emily, I know I'm doing all the talking here, but you can feel free. Did you have anything you want to add to anything I said? I feel like I'm just blabbering.
One thing I thought of was when like building up vitamin D was talking about that. I would say that's like for most vitamin deficiencies as well. You can't really fix them overnight. So it takes like replenishing them over time. And especially with more of a food-based diet, like getting them into your system might be a little easier because some vitamins can be more difficult. It's like you have to eat this vitamin with this kind of food. So there could be, it could be a little harder, especially for some people who can't access certain things. So especially having like that more food-based, it can help replenish those vitals a little bit more. But it doesn't happen overnight. And as like everything depending, I have a professor here at my school that she says whenever we're going over things that it just depends. Everything just depends. So it's really good to work with a dietitian to figure out what's best for you. And I think that's the really cool part about this profession, is how like personalized and how everything works differently for people.
Yeah, for sure. If you are, you know, wondering about individualized habits, whether it's like, oh, I don't know what to eat on my runs. Like I always, you know, feel like I'm going to poop my pants when I'm 3 miles out, or whether it's, you know, you're just not sure about everyday training diet. You feel really fatigued a lot. Like those are all great reasons to see a dietitian where they can really tease out what you're doing, your medical history, your, you know, supplements, your diet, and figure out what would be the best option for you. I do see another question here about fermented veggie examples. So yeah, sauerkraut would be an example. There's a great company. They're local. I think they're based out of Rhode Island. They're called, I think, Lost Art. They do different types of kraut. So they have like beet kraut. They have a regular sauerkraut. They have one that like, I think has like turmeric in it or something, like just a lot of fun flavors to experiment with. So they have really cool things. But yeah, any kind of traditionally fermented vegetable, you can, and traditionally fermented means that, you know, the veggies are packed in like a water and salt brine and they're left out to traditionally ferment. So they're not, it's not a quick brine with like a vinegar solution. So that would be the difference. So like pickles that are traditionally fermented versus the pickles that you see like on the supermarket shelves that are generally a vinegar brine. But a lot of times at like, I don't want to say fancy grocery stores, but like more health focused grocery stores, a lot of times will have traditionally fermented vegetables in the refrigerated section. A lot of farmers markets and things like that will carry them. Like we've gotten like fermented cauliflower and all kinds of random stuff. And you can ferment your own vegetables at home. If you feel comfortable with it. I still get a little nervous about stuff like that, you know, but if you feel comfortable with it, feel free. There's a lot of good tutorials out there on how to do traditionally fermented veggies at home. And that can be a really cost-effective and easy way of doing it. Emily, anything else you can think of?
I always think about kimchi as one. So like fermented cabbage is a good one. And also a lot of people really like kombucha. That's also a fermented beverage. There's a lot of beverages that are fermented too.
Yeah, that's a good example. I
I
love
was also thinking of beer, but that's not really a good example to say. But you know what? If you like a good beer every once in a while, why not?
Yeah, kombucha is a favorite of mine. I know it's hard because there's not much research on like how much like the levels of probiotics in all these foods, and it can really vary based on the batch and the manufacturer and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, like if you're a soda drinker and you're trying to switch to something else, kombucha is great because it's got that nice bubbly, fizzy quality to it.
Opening a kombucha for the first time.
Is that?
Opening a kombucha for the first time and seeing that like fizz, and I was like,
Yeah.
I can't get into it because of the texture, but I want to get into it.
Yeah, I love it. There's a Health Aid makes like a ginger lemon cayenne one. So it's like a little spicy. I'm like, ooh, this is so good. I love it. It's like my bougie purchase when I go to the grocery store. It's like $3.99 for one little bottle. I'm like, I'm gonna get this one little treat today. Does heat change the properties? Yes. So with probiotic foods, there are like certain probiotic foods. Oh gosh, I'm blanking on the name of one. It's like a soy-based product. But yes, if you heat up foods, it can reduce the levels of live cultures in there. The specific amount of how much you lose depends on how high it's heated and how long it's heated for. So if something's just like gently warmed, you're going to retain more of the probiotic qualities than something that is put in like a canning bath or something. Good question.
Also, sometimes heat can help things. I know one interesting fact that I found was that if you heat up rice, like if you cook rice and you store it, then you heat it up again, that can actually make more of that resistant starch for the bacteria as well.
Yeah. So for actual live cultures, heat's a negative factor. For resistant starch, for rice, potatoes, pasta, if you cook it, then cool it, then heat it again, it has more resistant starch in it. So yeah, that's a great point, Emily.
So if you have that Olive Garden pasta, don't feel ashamed of heating it up.
Any other questions? You guys had such good ones.
Any thoughts, and you didn't bring it up, because we see all the time, my grandmother drank it, apple cider vinegar, but with the mother. So
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Yeah. I think apple cider vinegar can be great to use in dressings. Don't know that I don't see that many health benefits from it as far as just consuming it straight up. There are a few very, very small studies suggesting maybe some possible benefits with like blood sugar or weight management, but I think we're kind of like focusing really, really granular when for most people, blood sugar management and weight management would be better. Like the better focus would be like the overall diet and just like a general healthy eating plan than kind of supplementing with shots of stuff that's going to mess up your teeth enamel and whatnot. Emily, anything to add?
Yeah, I think it's really funny that apple cider vinegar has become one of this like phenomenons for like weight loss. Because for my senior thesis, I did a paper on like weight management. That didn't really come up much in the literature. I think it's just really interesting how it has come up. I've even watched like people on YouTube just like, yes, apple cider vinegar shots, here we go. And it just looks painful. It just looks like painful. I don't know why you would want to like put yourself through that pain for something like weight management. And it's definitely about like that balance of nutrients, and honestly just finding that better relationship with food can help create a better relationship in general.
Yeah, I didn't know if you had any more information like that I was missing in seeing some of these things. Okay.
No, I think it's one of those things that like gets a lot of spotlight, but even though there is a little bit of research that says, yeah, maybe there's some small benefits, but I think much bigger benefits can be achieved from like an overall well-rounded diet. And again, the downside to taking apple cider vinegar shots is, I mean, it's straight up vinegar on your teeth.
Acid, right?
Yeah, acid.
Okay.
So if you do for some reason, just like if you're into it and you're like, Chrissy, no, I love my apple cider vinegar, just make it swish your mouth out with water afterwards if you are doing it. Just
no, I'll pass. You guys are the experts. Like you said, it's been in the news more. It's been this, you see it in the grocery store, and I was like, my grandmother used to do it, so I didn't know if there was something.
Yeah, I don't think there's anything in particular. And like I said, like if you want to incorporate it regularly because maybe there might be some benefit, then yeah, use it in a salad dressing or something like that where you're using it in a way that I think makes sense. Or cooking, you cook maybe like some collard greens and you have a little apple cider vinegar in there with a little bit of like maple syrup and it kind of balances out the dish, something along those lines. But yeah, I don't think that there is an overwhelming benefit to taking shots of apple cider vinegar. Good question.
I'm glad to hear. Thank you.
Welcome. Anything else? I'm surprised everybody is still here. That's awesome. You guys hung with me this whole hour. If nobody else, I'll give it one more second here. Last call for questions. All right. If nobody else has any questions, I'm going to go ahead and end this. But thank you all so much for coming. I hope that this was useful, gave you guys some good tips and things that you can implement in your everyday life. If you take nothing else away from this, be it to get your vitamin D levels checked, and if you need to take a vitamin D supplement. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to shoot me an email. You guys all have my email now. And we will be sending out a post-workshop survey. There will be a giveaway for a gift card if you fill it out. So please fill it out. It is for Emily's project, so for school. So filling it out is very helpful for her. And I will toss in some incentive that, we'll do a little gift card giveaway for those of you that do fill it out. You'll have a chance to win an Amazon gift card. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Great chatting with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
You too.
That's a nice conversation.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.